more specifically, hopefully, topicality for sure, right? And framework ambitiously towards the end, ambitiously. The reason why I start with T, I think it's because most teams against K debates anyway, they use T now instead of framework, but you can choose either or, but we're gonna start with T. As for just procedurals in general, what are they?
Procedures.
Procedurals, what are they? Who's heard that word before in debate? All right, Angel.
Debate about the debate.
Debate about the debate. What does that mean?
Debate.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Right, procedurals are basically rules, right, that you should follow in debate because we want debate to look a certain way. Right? Follow me? All right, I don't know if anyone has told you this, but there are no rules in debate. No rules. There are zero, none. I know this is shocking for some JV debaters, but there are 0 rules in debate. 0. There kind of is one rule, and that's because judges don't want to be there longer than they should, right? Which is time. You only have 8 minutes to talk, and you only have 8 minutes of prep. But even that is debatable, to be quite honest. The time. Okay? So procedurals, right, are rules, right, that we say are good for debate. And you want to set a certain standard, right, of how debate should look like. Okay? For any procedural or theory argument, okay? Oh, one last thing. Right, for those of you that run across a procedural argument, right, what do you have to do? Let's say that you have, I don't know, T, dised, case. That's the debate for the negative. Which one do you have to answer first? T, dised, case. T, why?
Procedural.
So?
It decides how to do
It's
it.
just because the T is the factor wondering if it's like topical or not, so you just have to answer.
So? Who cares? Yeah.
If you lose procedural, you lose the debate because you're not debating fairly.
So? Yeah. Why? Y'all keep giving me the same claim over and over, but none of you are giving me a warrant. Why? Why should we answer T first? Yeah.
Because if you lose T, it proves you're not topical.
So?
It also means you like not fall under the resolution.
So?
You're not debating.
There we go. Right? You're breaking the rule. Right? And that determines the debate or how we debate instead of the debate proper or the flows. It's kind of like if you were to play Monopoly and you started making up your own rules. Do other people want to play? Not really. Although we kind of make up our own rules anyway in Monopoly. Who really knows exactly what you're supposed to do in Monopoly? Really? But you're right. You have to answer that first because it is like before the debate. It determines how we debate. You broke the rules, therefore you should lose. If you don't defend yourself as to why you broke the rules or why you're saying that you didn't break the rules, right, then you lost. You just lost. You just lost on default. You could have been amazing on the dised. You could have been link turning left and right, and you're like, yes, app out ways. But if you drop that, you lost. Every procedural comes first, especially T. Okay? All right, now what is the structure of any procedural? Any. Yes. Yeah.
The interpretation, the violation, and the standard.
Yeah. The enter. Right? Which is basically states, right? Sometimes there's evidence that states what it is that you're defining or you're saying things should look like. This is what we think it looks like. This is our interpretation. This is what we think is best. How to define the subject or the topic or the rules of debate. We think it should look this way. For example, in condo, right, you think interpretation, right, the app should have, no, the neg should have 1 conditional advocacy and 2 unconditional. I don't know. Make sense? You dictate how you want that to look like. But it's debatable. Sometimes, and I know I was this kind of debater, I was terrified of procedurals because they were using debate jargon left and right, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this is. Right, but it's a debate about debate, and as long as you know what you want debate to look like, It's okay. Okay? And good. The second part is the violation. What is that? That one should be obvious. Y'all are good at that.
Whoa.
I'm just not following the rules.
All the other two violating. Can someone explain it to me without using the word violating? Yeah. There we go. What the app did wrong. Okay? Sometimes, right, if you want to be sneaky, right, instead of asking, or if you want to, increase credibility a little bit, right, you ask the judge, hey, or during cross-ex, the question is, so what did the app do wrong? Instead of specifically saying violation. Especially if you're a K team, right, if you phrase the question in that way, like what did the app do wrong, they're already saying that you're bad, so that can turn into a dissent for the K, or for your K app, but it's right? What's next? Standards. Yeah, standards. What are standards? Yeah.
Limits.
That's an example of a standard, yes. What's a standard? What? Yeah, right. Basically, a standard in which how we should dictate which is the best inter. Right? An example of that is limits. The interpretation that places the most limits, for example, is the best standard that determines which interpretation is better. Who's lost? Yeah. Where are we stuck?
I don't really get what the interpretation is.
Interpretation is just how you define a thing. Like, for example, if you want to interpret debate as a game, you're like, hey, debate is a game. That's your interpretation. We should view debate as a game. We should have fun. There should be rules, and we should all have the ability or chance to win. If you view debate as a learning environment, then maybe you should say that. We think debate is a space where we come to learn about things like arms sales. If you think debate sucks, right? Maybe you should tell us why debate sucks and why we shouldn't do it. If you think that's a debate thing. Hopefully you don't do that. Please don't. That's really annoying. But, yeah. Okay? You dictate how you want debate to be or look like. Okay? Sometimes there's definitions that you pull up from a scholarly source that defines that for you. But you dictate that. Okay? Alright, so standards. Back to standards, right? That's how we compare which interpretation or which standard is best for debate. A classic one is limits. You can either say we should limit a lot debate because it makes debate more or debatable. Who agrees with that? Placing more limits, right, or restrictions on things that we can talk about and not talk about, that's good. Because it makes debate more fair. You have one person, really? All of you think limits are bad? Raise your hand if you think limits are bad.
Oh.
Limits are bad, raise your hand. Y'all are wild. But that's the thing, if you are like, limits are bad, I should get to go, I can't say that word here, but you can. Okay? If you want to go ham, right, go for it. That's definitely a thing, you can choose to do that. Who agrees with me that you should place a limit with debate, or in debate? Limit's good. Thank God. Some reasonable folks in this room. Okay, why are limits good?
Because they help make the scope of debate stay on topic.
Good, stay on topic. Right, why is staying on topic good?
You only have so many time that you don't wanna go everywhere in 8 minutes, you wanna just stay on one topic.
So, why is that good?
It's clash.
Good, why is clash good? Yeah.
It makes it so that everyone has a fair advantage in ways to have fun.
Why is fairness good? Wait, who said that? What? Friendships? I mean, alright, fair. Why is that good?
Because it's fun for everyone.
Because you learn more, you have
So you can brag?
Hey, that's a good one, right? Increase education if you have a smaller topic, right? I think maybe y'all are right setting, you all were right? Fairness is good because it means that, it's a fair chance of winning, right? Who wants to play a game that's unfair, right? Two different impacts, which is what I was pushing you for, okay? All right, but what's another standard? Limit to the classic. Sometimes things overlap, and that's okay.
What was the question?
What's that what?
I said, what was the question?
What's another standard?
Ground.
Yeah. Good, predictability. Again, like I said, some of these things overlap. We can see why, right? This can go in here, or the other way, right? But it's okay. Okay, what is predictability? Yeah.
Oh, can I say another?
Sure.
Ground.
Ground. Good. Alright, what's another one? Wait, before we get there, what's ground? What's ground? Joel talked about it yesterday in his topic lecture.
The literature the alpha and have access to.
There we go. Based on the resolution that we have, right, what can the neg talk about and what can the app talk about? Okay? The T-interpol theory would argue that you have violated some sort of ground. Like for example, K, apps. Would you think that it's neg lit or app lit? App literature or neg literature? Or neg ground or app ground? K apps. Neg. Why?
Because keys are round.
What?
It's not affirming the resolution.
Elaborate a little bit more. You're kind of right. You're not wrong. Why is K apps neg ground? Yeah.
They're used to critique left line.
There we go. Right. Usually K apps critique the USFG or critique some part of the resolution. Right? Critiques or negative args against the resolution should be neg ground. That should be a negative argument. Hello, right? I mean, that's the only thing we have as an egg, right? What's the one job of the negative? To disprove the F, disprove the resolution. Well, the F beat you to it. Now what? Right? You can call that as unfair. Right? That's why topic literature, that lecture yesterday is important. If you took notes, you can use these as examples in your T arts later. Okay. And then the last one, the one everyone loves, especially novices, they love saying this. It's a voter. What's a voter? Abuse. They love calling abuse.
Oh, yeah.
What's a voter?
Reasons why to vote for a particular side.
The reasons why it matters. The impact of this. Okay? And there's two impacts. Only two. For the most part. That I can do. Yeah.
Education.
Good. Education. What's the other one?
Fairness.
Fairness. Yay. Alright. Always, I think it's more strategic to keep them separate in the beginning and then maybe overlap them later. Alright? So you have different pieces to argue about, right? If you just want to go for the fairness arg, you can do that later. If you just want to go for the education claim, you can do that later. Or if you want to combine the two later, feel free to do that. Okay, but there's two, fairness and education. Okay? And then hopefully in your block or later on in the speeches, you elaborate how exactly they broke this. How did they kill education? How did they kill fairness? How did they make it impossible to debate? All of these things are things you should hash out later in the debate. Okay? But now that my computer's working.
Yeah, that's fine.
I need y'all taking a nap on me, that's okay. Does anybody know how to work this?
What you need?
The
To turn it on.
Oh no.
Oh.
I could try.
Like the projector.
Just press buttons.
Yeah.
press buttons.
If you break it,
It's fine.
Alright, I guess not. Alright, so you guys have to look at me talk.
Let me see.
oh, she's under the projector.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Alright, so now on T. Okay? What's the first thing that you need?
Interpretation.
Thank you. The interp. Someone's awake. Okay? Right? Or your definition. Usually we see this in the form of a definition. Okay? Alright, number 2. What do you do here?
Violation.
Yeah, the violation. How does the app not meet this definition? Okay? Alright, number 3. Good, standards. Or some of the novice packets say reasons to prefer. And if I wasn't clear earlier, right, standards are just a way to determine which definition is best for the debate. Our definition is better because of limits. Our definition is better because it's the most predictable. Our definition is better for ground. Make sense? Standards determines how the judge weighs the interpretation or the definition. So I should hear a lot of comparison later on in the debate about standards. I mean, some of y'all just usually extend the shell. You're like, extend our T-shell? Next, what? No. Right, you're supposed to do all 3 and elaborate. Okay, so I hope you piece those things together in the 2 and C, 1 and R. Usually the 1 and R should go for G. But, right, the 2 and R. Okay. Alright, but for voters, fairness in education. Okay, there's so many strategic ways that you can flip this, right? For example, on the education claim, right? If the app is like, our definition is, the app is more, or our definition is better because it's better for education. We get to learn about different topics, blah, 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 a different side of the topic, blah, 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 right? You could always flip it on them, right? In order to be educational, right, you need to be fair. Yes, I get you're trying to be creative and that's awesome, right? But in order for your creativity to be educational, you need to be fair. You see how I flipped that? Okay, you could always flip it, right? It's always goes either way, right? Education is a prerequisite to fairness. I'm not sure how that would work, but you can always do that, right? Fairness is key to education. And we already talked about some of the internals there, right? Clash, topic lit, all of that. Okay. But yeah, this is a T show. Any questions? Yeah.
And can you explain standards and inter?
Standards and inter?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, right, you've seen it in your novice packets. I'm not sure whether we have a file for T yet. I know we will, and I know it's coming. But that's just the definitions. Kind of like, I'm not sure y'all do this in an essay for the most part. Right, when you define certain terms. Like it's necessary that we both know what we, for example, right, let's say that we're having a debate about computers. Right? The resolution is computers are awesome. The app says that Apple is better. Why do we need to define the word apple there?
We talking about the fruit.
The apple, yeah.
Apple could be a fruit. Therefore, we should probably define what we mean by apple. I know it sounds kind of like duh, especially in this scenario, right? But for the topic, I don't know if you were paying attention to Joe's lecture, what do we have a definition of? For the government arms. I don't know, a team could be like, let's decrease arms sales. Right? That might be interesting. Right? So if they do talk about arms sales, right, what should you do?
Define arms.
Define arms in the context of what you think the resolution resolution means, right? You think it's a weapon, like a gun or a grenade launcher or something, I don't know, right? But you get what I mean. That's why definitions are important. Otherwise, the ad can talk about arms. Make sense? Okay, and yeah, you won't be ready to have a debate about body parts. It's just kind of like, what? Okay, that's why it's important. Definitions, especially when they're ambiguous. Sometimes, and it does happen sometimes, that you have a definition about the words. I've had a debate once about the word the. I was a freshman in college and I didn't know anything about debate. I was just reading stuff and they read the interpretation, the means blah blah blah, and I'm like, what? That was me. I was really lost. But yeah, the is debatable. If it's in the resolution. The word resolved is also debatable. Okay, every single part of the resolution, including the colon. Yeah.
Oh God.
Including the grammar in the resolution or in your plan text. That could be untopical. Yeah, and I mean, this will become, this is rare, but it does happen. It does. Okay, and like I said, you just deal with it, right? Be like, well, you have a counter interpretation. A period means the end of you talking. I don't know, right? Actually, I don't know, that was rude. Okay, but you get what I mean. You dictate the standards of when that happens to you. Okay, all right. All right. So now, question: what is the resolution? What? Some of you are forgetting the one word in that statement.
Resolve.
Resolve.
Hey, but we first.
Hold on, let me just call on one of you randomly. Or you can volunteer. What's the resolution?
Resolve. The United States federal government should substantially reduce direct commercial sales and or foreign military sales of arms for the United States.
Thank God. That's amazing. All right, my lab. Remember, you're getting quiz on this later. All right, but knowing the resolution is super important. Right? Like, how the heck are you going to know that the app is violating a definition if you don't know what the res is? You need to know the resolution, minimum. It's not acceptable if a team is like, what is the res? And you're like, what? What's the res, partner? Right? You have to know this. You have to. Okay? All right, so some of you, right, might hate topicality. Who actually likes it? Huh? Who hates it? Why?
There's always a horrible
Alt? The T shell has no alt. What do you mean? Then you should love T. Why do we hate T? T is awesome. Raise your hand, T haters. Alright, why do you hate T? Up here in the front.
It's just in context of the debate, it's always like, it's basically a nuisance at a certain point.
Because you're cheating. Alright? Who else thinks T is unfair? Or it sucks? Over there in the back. Why?
It's basically just like the mag, like whining, like, oh, you're not being fair.
Yeah. That's a good approach, right? I feel like if you're that type of person, one of your arguments should be like, debate's hard, get over it. Debate's hard. It's always unfair. Someone would always read faster than you. Someone's always going to be slower than you. Someone's going to have more evidence than you all the time. Right? But the reason why T is such a great argument, and I didn't appreciate it back when I was your age, is that sometimes apps are really cheating. Apps really do cheat. Apps really do cheat. Like, they could literally be talking about arms, right, because they think they're clever, and they know people won't have diss ads to that specific app. And guess what? Now you don't have answers to it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You know they're unfair, you know they're not topical, but now you only have a K with no links, basically, only the USFG links to argue the F. such an easy debate to win. Let's say that you forgot to update, please don't do this, but let's say, hypothetically, that you forgot to update your politics dissent. I don't know, presidential elections have passed, you literally have nothing, except for tea. Okay, and you can still win, even though they call you out on your non-unique dissent. T is super important. Please make sure that you know how to run T. It's such a strategic art, especially against chaos. We'll talk about that later. Okay. Oh, now let's tackle part for part. All right, which definitions are best for T?
What?
Which definitions are best for T? Who said that? Amazing. All right, law journals. What else? What was that? Scholarly studies. All right, what else?
Constitution.
Especially with this topic area.
Definitions from the actual USFG.
Good. Government. Definitions. The reason why I emphasize this is because sometimes we're lazy, I get it, but we pull out words from words and phrases, dictionary.com, okay? And why is that definition, or when you see an opponent with that definition, why should you call them out immediately?
It's not credible. Yeah, it's not credible.
What was that?
Not trustworthy.
Why is it not trustworthy?
Because it's not sure.
Can anyone edit dictionary.com?
Yes.
Oh, damn. Yeah, I didn't know that. It's definitely as unpredictable as Wikipedia. Okay? Alright, but this is also important because then when you have debates about definitions, you can say that yours is the best because it's more in context of the resolution. Let's say that it's one about a professor from sociology from, I don't know, USC versus Attorney General of the United States. Who should I believe a little bit more? Why?
Because that's more authentic.
He makes more money?
I mean, that's more.
Alright, that's his occupation. He's an expert. He works. You all know what I mean. Okay, and then you can get the judge to prefer your interpretation based on where it comes from. Pay attention to the definition and who wrote it. Because then the debate could come down to that. Okay? No, I couldn't connect it or turn it on. It's just 20 minutes long. Okay? Alright, but yeah, you get what I mean. Okay? Now in terms of violation, right, usually it's just one sentence in the shell, right? But later on in the debate, here you should elaborate a little bit more. Okay? Give the judge like reasons. Here's how they violate. 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
I was gonna say repeat that.
Yeah. How they violate your definition. How they don't meet it. We're gonna talk about answers to T in a second. Okay? Make sure you have a list. Lists are awesome. Labeling 1, 2, 3 is also awesome. It keeps the debate clean and organized. Okay? In terms of standards, we already talked about a couple, right? Which is limits, ground. Who's heard of the term bright line?
Oh.
Just one? What is it?
The bright line is at what point is something
Yeah, it's like what determines the distinction between what is and what is not topical. Like, what is that line? Sometimes it's arbitrary, right? Sometimes it's like some view it as topical, some don't, right? But that's a debate to be had. Okay? Just because you're like, oh my god, it could be both. Use that to your advantage, right? Prove the other side. Okay, you've been doing switch side debate forever. Okay? One that is like not as common anymore, but it may come up, and I think it's the lamest one to be quite honest. But one of the standards is framer's intent.
Oh.
What do y'all think that means? Framer's intent.
The intent of the people who have made the Constitution, or
Not the Constitution.
who made it in general, like or of like the people who, well, the people who made the initial thing that you're talking about would be, I
What was
guess,
that? The last
like what you made, like or whatever you're talking about. So like the people who made that thing.
There we go. those who created the resolution didn't mean to define arms as armed. They meant to define it as military weapons. Why is that a weak argument? Although it is. I think it's a weak argument.
How do you know? Because you can't read their mind and like you don't know who they're.
Well, there's a topic paper, if you're open, right? There's a specific essay that someone took the time to write that explains a resolution word for word and tells you what AF ground you have, what neg ground you have. Look it up, college debate topic paper, arms, and you'll find it. Okay? So we kind of sort of do know, right? But why is it like super weak? And it's so easy for K teams, for example, to attack that standard. Framers' intent. The creators of the resolution didn't mean for us to do it that way. You did it wrong. Really? You're gonna think that something is good just because someone told you to? Yes, kill that person. What?
Which person?
Yes, segregation. That's good. It's a law. Someone told us to do it. Sure, detention centers. That's the thing. Those are good because the government told us that it's good.
I mean, depends on which side of
You see what I mean? Just because someone told you to do something, that doesn't mean it's a good thing. Just because the framers told us to talk about weapons, doesn't mean that it's a good thing. It just doesn't. That's why I think it's the weakest one, but you might hear it. Okay? Alright, so now let's talk about entering T, because this is super important. Right, and this is the structure of your blocks against T. What's the first thing you should always say?
Interpretation.
Oh. We meet. Thank you. We meet. Now we have our ab caps on. Now we're affirmative. Okay. We meet. We meet your definition. Here's how. Don't just say we meet. Period. Move on. No. You gotta explain how you meet their interpretation. We meet. Okay. Next is a counter-inter. That's a long word, so I'm just gonna write CI. Counter-inter. Counter-interpretation. What is a counter-interpretation? If this is my interpretation, right, the negative, that's their interpretation. What's a counter-interpretation for the affirmative?
Your definition.
What was that? There we go. Excellent. Here's a counter to your inter. Here's a different inter. Here's another definition. Blam. Okay? The counter-interpretation. What do you think comes next? Violation. New. New.
Reasons to prefer.
New. Not yet. Framework. New. What is next after the counter-inter? No. It's basically how you meet your own definition. Here's how we abide by our inter. We actually sell weapons, guns. Here's how. Our plan says blah, blah, blah. So we do abide by our inter. Okay. Next, as you all guessed it, counter. Your counter standards, or just call them standards. Or reasons why we should prefer your definition over the next. Okay, why we should prefer, or reasons to prefer your interp versus the next. Yours is better for limits. Yours is more restrictive. That's good. You get to limits better than the negative term. Or if you want to go the opposite direction, right, which is over limiting bad, open limits good. Or more generic ground good. Yeah.
I'm confused between number 1 and number 3.
Number and 3. Here, the we meet, great question, right? The we meet, right, is how you meet this insert. We meet their interpretation. This is sketchy, right? If the app is arm, or literal cell of arms, right? And the neg is like, arms means arm, okay? The app can say, we meet arm because we need an arm to shoot somehow. That's a stretch, right? But we meet their interpretation of arm because we need an arm to shoot an arm. Just got it. Deep. Okay. Alright, does that make sense? How you meet their interpretation. The counter interpretation is a different interpretation than that one. It's a different definition of arm. You're saying, no, it's a weapon. Yeah.
You said like a counter standard is kind of saying like why ours is better. Would example of that be like, oh, ours happens in a faster time period?
Yeah, except for the faster parts, okay? But definitely on the same comparison part. Yeah, we're better for limits, right? Or you should prefer our inter because it creates more limits, and limits good for education. Limits good for fairness. You compare both. Okay, but yes, I was about to get to that later, but yeah, you're ahead. Alright? But yeah, counter-interp, one more time, is a different interpretation than that provided by the negative. Lots of you tend to leave the debate here. No, you should not leave the debate there because you will probably lose. That's a defensive argument. You're just covering yourself. We're not being unfair. We use an arm, technically. Okay, you need the rest of this. Even if you don't get to the we need part later in the debate, I would prefer you at least extend your counter interpretation. That's at least more often on your side. Because you meet your definition, hopefully. Right? I hope. Right? That you chose a definition that meets your affirmative. So if you have a counter-interp that already supports your affirmative, it just makes logical sense to prioritize the counter-interpretation and not theirs. Make sense? If you're like lost or don't have time, at least extend this. But if you're going for T in the debate, or in the 2A, or in the affirmative, always, always, always put the interpretations at the top. Always. Don't just be like, don't start with there and there. No. Here's our interpretation. Here's how they violated it. Here are all our favors. Here's how they responded to us. It's not adequate because, and then you do refutation. Make sense? Anyone confused? Have lots of questions here, which are great questions, alright? And this is not easy. T is super, super valuable, trust me. But even if you don't use it, you're still gonna debate it anyway. So you need to understand, okay?